From the Classic 107 studios in downtown Winnipeg, 107 Live for Birchwood Jaguar, the art of performance.
on Winnipeg's Classic 107. In this 4 o'clock hour of the Diamond Lane, you just heard live in studio the Dover Quartet. My name is Simeon Rusnak, and you heard Joel and Brian on the violin, Milena on the viola, and Camden on the cello. They're here in Winnipeg to perform as part of the Virtuosi concert series, and that's tomorrow evening. And ahead of that performance, they were kind enough to offer us a sampling of their sound, and what a sampling that was. And I'm beyond excited now to welcome you guys for a little brief chat. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, let's adjust some things here. We're just readjusting, going to be sharing the mic. Well, I want to begin by welcoming you back to Winnipeg. I mean, you've been before. You were here last in...
years ago.
Yeah, in 2015, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so since then, you guys have been busy, to say the least. I mean, two CDs, an incredibly busy performing schedule. You're teaching, you're mentoring, you're workshopping. I have to begin by asking, what's it like being one of the most in-demand quartets in the world? Give me a little behind-the-scenes peek.
Oh.
We live at airports.
Nice.
Time definitely goes by very quickly. We know each other way better, actually, than we ever thought we could in just the last couple years.
Or would want.
Or would want to.
Nice. Oh, I'm sure it is. And one of the things that really caught my eye was this whole idea of getting that behind-the-scenes look. You guys aren't just taking the stage, but you're also actively showcasing classical music and what is involved of the players, something that often gets overlooked. Like for me, I'm thinking in 2017, we look at Instagram, we look at things where we're going like, oh, I can get a behind-the-scenes peek of whatever a sports star is doing. You guys have been working on a film too, right? Like it hasn't just been other stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about this film that you guys have been working on?
Well, it's actually, that's a good example you use. It's very much the idea of humanizing what we do and having people be able to relate to what we do, why we do it, that we're passionate about it, that it's not all easy and kind of like the concert part of it is such a small part. So we've been working on this full-length documentary film that kind of gets behind the scenes, the nitty-gritty, the emotional hardships, arguments, personal relationships, everything is in there. But hopefully the gist of it will be that what we do is something that we love very much, and it's very fulfilling despite how hard it is.
And that we struggle with the same everyday things that other people struggle with. It's we're not just people who get dressed up and do evening concerts. We have lives outside of that.
Yeah, that's just it, right? You have a life, and you have these other things that you're doing. And I mean, so often we get caught up in the name. The Dover Quartet is here in Winnipeg, and let me begin by saying, like, I'm super excited that you guys are. But it's just such a unique behind-the-scene glimpse that I find so fascinating, because there is so much that goes into what audiences take on the stage, right?
Definitely. I think also, your initial question really made me think, being a classical musician in this era, one thing that I've noticed a lot, even in the last year, the number of festivals or presenters that request a little preview video from us is just skyrocketing. So we'll be rehearsing, we'll be about to go on stage at an actual concert, but we have to get ready to email someone a video previewing their concert in 6 months. So we have to shoot that while we're backstage, we really should be tuning, getting ready, things like that. So it's crazy, actually. In a way that the social media thing is really fantastic.
Yeah.
It's also really increased the amount of behind the scenes work that has to be done too. Because that's something that musicians in previous generations wouldn't have ever thought about, is sort of creating their own publicity all the time.
Of course.
And I think presenters are looking for that too, for different ways to be able to connect with their audiences, and getting them to trust them in terms of presenting newer and newer composers that people aren't sure are really great. I think people are often skeptical of new composers, but just having that faith and that trust, people are looking for different ways to reach out and kind of making the concert stage less of a formal thing, and kind of bringing it to places like coffee shops and things like that.
Accessibility, right, is a big thing that it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I do want to talk about the program that is coming up tomorrow, because I think it's a really exciting one. But before we get to all that, just to go back and to go down memory lane, I suppose, you guys all came together at Curtis, 18, 19 years of age, You swept Banff at the International String Quartet. You won Fishoff, the accolades, the awards, they go on, and rightfully so. I'm just wondering, though, 10 years of almost playing together, what has changed? I imagine something has, but what is it in your experience?
I don't know. I feel like we've all gotten better at understanding each other, and I don't know. I feel like it's really easy to take things personally because it's, it's not only our job, but it's also our life and what we do, and we take it so seriously. And being in a room with 3 other people that you're both appreciative of the criticism, and sometimes you're it's hard to take. I think it's really good that I think we're getting better and better at separating the personal and the business side of it, which takes a long time to feel that kind of trust and comfort with people outside of your family, new family.
Yeah.
I suppose.
And also playing together for 10 years, we're lucky that our priorities, especially because we're touring so much and performing so much, we're lucky that they've been able to shift. Because I would say that when we first started playing together, our priority was how to sound like a group.
Right.
We rehearsed so much every single day. If we were to rehearse as much as we did back then, now with the type of touring schedule we have, we would never sleep or eat.
We'd probably just quit, honestly.
Yeah. So I mean, it's actually really amazing that because we know each other so well in one another's playing, there's an intuition that wasn't there before. And we're able to prioritize personal practice, try to keep our own playing at its highest possible level, and getting enough rest before concerts and that kind of thing. So there has been a distinct shift in quartet behavior, but I think it's possible because we've been playing together for so long.
Yeah, that evolution from a younger ensemble to a more mature one, right? I mean, it's not like I'm talking to older players here, right? I mean, it's only been 10 years. And so I think that's a really cool aspect about it. You touched on practicing, and you've played together for those 10 years. How do you guys go about practicing new music, past repertoire that you did, let's say, 6 years ago or something like that? How do you guys go about practicing things as individuals first and then coming together?
That's a great question. Honestly, every learning curve is different depending on the piece. And certainly revisiting a piece is really different from learning something new. I think what's fun is usually when we're revisiting a piece, we just play through it. And it's always mostly just fun because all these memories come back and you remember how much you love each detail and this and that. And there's still a lot of muscle memory there. And then it becomes about furthering your relationship to that music and what do you see in it now that you didn't notice before? What do you feel in it now that you didn't notice? And that's always really enjoyable. Learning a new piece is it's so different depending on the piece. Sometimes you have to chip away at it really slowly. Like right now we're working on Zemlinsky 2 and it's hard to get through it. It's really difficult. So it's like we can't really just read through the whole piece. Like we haven't made it to the last bar yet. So we can't just crash through it and then work on things. We have to sort of go take it in sections and gradually dissect it. And it's also really fun. It's just really different.
That was Camden on the cello. Joel, did you have something to add to that idea?
No, I mean, I agree with what he's saying. I think, what he's talking about specifically with the Zemlinsky is also just that the way we would maybe rehearse another piece that is more kind of in a language that we would understand or is more normal, like a new Mozart quartet, for example. We might not really know the piece, but it is one that you can read through several times and figure out a lot of things. And the learning curve is quite fast because it's a language that we're familiar with. But Zemlinsky's, it's such heavy-duty music, and there's so much happening all the. It's extremely dense.
It's
dense.
It's always changing tempo. I think that's really.
It's always changing all the time, and there are little things here and there that you didn't hear the first time that then are popping out and things. So it's it's just too much material to kind of get a very holistic approach. That'll be something we'll do hopefully, in another week or so.
Well, I also don't know if Camden mentioned this earlier, but a lot of the time when we practice our own parts before we've even played the piece in the group, things feel completely different once you put them together. And so a certain fingering or bowing or something that really works alone in the practice room suddenly makes no sense, or you don't even recognize the passage when you're playing it as a group, and it completely changes the way that you'll do your fingerings or bowings or the way that you'll play your part.
And that spontaneity is still there, right? Which I think is the really cool thing. And the cool thing about chamber music is that there is that element of spontaneity. What is the person beside you going to do? And how's it going to change when you go alone and then when you take it to a group? I want to touch on a few more things. One of the most important things I think for young musicians is this whole idea of mentorship, working with someone who's established, asking them questions, workshopping things. You guys have been hailed as the next Guarneri. I know, in fact, you guys have worked with Guarneri players, right? Yesterday I had the opportunity to interview the cellist David Liam Roberts, who's going to be opening for you guys. And I was wondering, as someone who's just finishing high school and moving on, what advice do you offer to the next generation to be looking down the line?
Don't be afraid of failure, for sure.
Yeah, I think people have often looked at our career, and you know, even as you're introducing us, like, oh, all these accolades.
Yeah.
What people don't always know is all the things that we applied for and weren't successful for, and we, you know, of course, you're not going to put that on your bio.
I think we should put that in the bio.
Yeah.
So
Didn't get YCA twice.
Yeah, I think everyone is
Failed at this competition.
Yeah. Wasn't accepted.
Wait,
with this
listed
tape.
here.
Yeah. So I think I mean that's just a short way of saying, you know, kind of, I guess I'm cheating and just going off of Brian's comment, but we certainly had our share of failures. I think a lot of people sometimes feel like we never had them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quickly interesting how we forget those things, but that element of perseverance kind of continues. I think that beautifully segues into tomorrow's program in a way, because tomorrow's program is called Triumph of the Spirit. It's an emotional program featuring the music of two Holocaust composers, Simon Locks and Victor Ullmann. I know that both of these composers you featured on your 2017 disc, which was called Voices of Defiance. What can you tell me about the two of them?
Ooh,
Well,
a lot.
yeah. Victor Ullmann was a prisoner at Theresienstadt when he wrote the piece that we're performing and that we recorded, his third string quartet. It's really an incredible piece, incredibly beautiful, triumphant, very much like the title of our program. And it's just fascinating that he was able to write something like that while a prisoner in such a horrific situation. And the end of his story was far too early. He was transported to Auschwitz and pretty much gassed upon arrival. And it's a very interesting connection he has to the other composer, Simon Locks, who was a Polish Jewish composer who actually survived Auschwitz and would have been there at the same time that Ullmann was brought there. And one of the main reasons he was able to survive Auschwitz is that he was made to be the director of the prisoners' orchestra at Auschwitz. So for him, he actually wrote this book called Music from Another World. For him, music became almost a form of torture, something very heartbreaking to think about for those of us who dedicate our lives to it. But it was something that became a perversion to him, because all he was allowed to do was conduct this orchestra playing German marches as their fellow prisoners were going off to work or going off to the gas chambers. So the piece that actually the movement we just played here in the studio. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We
heard a little bit of the Locks.
Yeah,
right?
That was the slow movement of his quartet, and one of the most incredible things about that piece, that movement, how anguished it is, how emotional it is, how connected it is emotionally.
Yeah.
The fact that he says in his book that he felt disconnected from music and that it was just another form of cruel and unusual torture. And then after they liberated the camps, this is the first piece he published. He was able to write something like that.
It almost sounds like, to us, like a sort of thought process that he's going through, and a sort of cathartic method where he's working through some of what he experienced. And the piece overall is a pretty joyful one. You certainly sense that he's very, very grateful to be alive. But there's a real, especially in the movement that you heard, there's a real, very straightforward look at the pain that he's felt. And it's a significant process through the piece. The last movement, for instance, is almost like this walk through where he's walking home, but there are still these memories that are haunting him, but the closer he gets to home, the stronger he feels, and the more the joy sort of overwhelms and eclipses that pain. So it's kind of an interesting mental and emotional journey, I think, that he wrote out for himself, it really seems.
Like you said, a cathartic experience, just so full of pathos, and this idea of like almost returning home, but like as a changed person. And of course, how could you not be changed? I mean, this is really things that we can't fathom. The last thing I want to ask you is about the Mendelssohn and the Schumann, who bookend those two works. How do they fit into the program?
Ooh, that's a really good question. There's always been a very rich relationship, I think, between Mendelssohn and Schumann. And I think as far as especially the Schumann, Schumann struggled a lot throughout his life, actually tremendously, and struggled with composition, kind of went through periods of extreme prolific writing for short periods, and then, kind of dry spells. And, I think it was just very, very tough for him. So I guess for us, we kind of view, the string quartets that he wrote for his wife as a birthday present. One of the ones is the second one. It was a set of 3. just kind of we are super in love with these pieces, and I think they're especially performers' pieces. I think they're all pieces that performers really love playing. They're very, very difficult, and sometimes they're kind of tough to pull off with audiences. But we're very sure that it's a very triumphant piece, and one that it's really gnarly and difficult. And it's, I have to say that the third movement is fiendishly nasty. Yeah. But it's such a unique experience, and the ending is so incredibly joyful. It's the last one's kind of like a really kind of joyful, like a dance
circus music.
Yeah,
in an intentionally funny, goofy way, but it's really virtuosic.
So I guess for him a triumph over his difficulties, because we find them to be some of the greatest pieces of the repertoire.
And that's how the show ends, is walking away with the Schumann, correct? I don't think those are the history textbook definitions. I mean, gnarly, funky circus music. Like if I look up,
you can find them in some.
We're gonna change the
in
way
the Grove
they write
Dictionary.
about
I was gonna say, just go talk to Feliska or something. I want to thank you guys so much for being so generous with your time and for a live performance here in the Classic 107 studios. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
You can catch the Dover Quartet tomorrow. That's Saturday, November 4th. They are performing at Eckhart Grammaté Hall, the latest installment of the Virtuosi concert series. Such a pleasure chatting with Joel, Brian, Milena, and Camden here in the studio. You even heard a little performance of theirs to begin this segment. You're in the Diamond Lane. For more information, head to virtuosi.mb.ca.
107 Live is Classic 107's intimate concert series, brought to you by Birchwood Jaguar, the art of performance.